Hi, I'm James Gillett, the Managing Director for Redemption Inc. By the end of today's video, you should understand the philosophy and strategy of Redemption Inc. Inc. is a social business enterprise that will help reintegrate men back into society coming from the prison system. The business model integrates self-development and healing around career opportunities afforded to successful candidates in mining, oil, gas, any related industries that have career pathways. Why should the public care? Well, the public should care because per year, it's $150,000 per prisoner per year in Western Australia. And the prison population has grown from 3,000 in 2004 to 5,000 in 2014, and just recently it's just ballooned up to 8,000 people in our prison system. So what is that? What does that mean money wise? So with 8,000 people in the system, that's $1.2 billion per year to send people to a place that is a trauma factory. Or overcrowding, inhumane, trauma breeds trauma. People don't go to prison. Like when I went to prison the first time, I didn't come out better than when I went in. If anything, it closed off my heart. It really, because what is prison? Prison's a place it's just governed by fear. Fear is the main currency in prison. You don't go into prison, like your hierarchy, your status in the hierarchy in prison, the criminal world, in the drug world, all those types of places, everything is just run by fear. But fear is creeping into all areas of society. Like a lot of people, it's not just that world, it's even governing how our governments run, how our businesses and stuff are run. People, they've got too much fear to try and do. Everything's all risk. They want to look like they're doing the right things, but they're just not making the hard choices.
Obvious implications are for the war on drugs, right? In Arizona, I went out with a group of women who were made to wear T-shirts saying I was a drug addict and go out on chain gangs and dig graves while members of the public could jeer at them. And when those women get out of prison, they're going to have criminal records that mean they'll never work in the legal economy again. Now, that's a very extreme example, obviously, in the case of the chain gang, but actually almost everywhere in the world we treat addicts to some degree like that. We punish them, we shame them, we give them criminal records, we put barriers between them reconnecting. There was a doctor in Canada, Dr. Gabor Mate, an amazing man, who said to me, if you wanted to design a system that would make addiction worse, you would design that system. Now, there's a place that decided to do the exact opposite, and I went there to see how it worked. In the year 2000, Portugal had one of the worst drug problems in Europe. 1% of the population was addicted to heroin, which is kind of mind-blowing. And every year, they tried the American way more and more. They punished people and stigmatized them and shamed them more. And every year, the problem got worse. And one day, the Prime Minister and the leader of the opposition got together and basically said, look, we can't go on with a country where we're having ever more people becoming heroin addicts. Let's set up a panel of scientists and doctors to figure out what would genuinely solve the problem. And they set up a panel led by an amazing man called Dr. João Goulão to look at all this new evidence. And they came back and they said, decriminalize all drugs, from cannabis to crack. But, and this is the crucial next step, take all the money we used to spend on cutting addicts off, on disconnecting them, and spend it instead on reconnecting them with the society. And that's not really what we think of. What they did wasn't really what we think of as drug treatment in the United States and Britain. So they do residential rehab, they do psychological therapy that does have some value. But the biggest thing they did was the complete opposite of what we do. A massive program of job creation for addicts and microloans for addicts to set up small businesses. So say you used to be a mechanic. When you're ready, they go to a garage and they'll say, if you employ this guy for a year, we'll pay half his wages. The goal was to make sure that every addict in Portugal had something to get out of bed for in the morning. And when I went and met the addicts in Portugal, it's fascinating. What they said is, as they rediscovered purpose, they rediscovered bonds and relationships with the wider society. It'll be 15 years this year since that experiment began, and the results are in. Injecting drug use is down in Portugal, according to the British Journal of Criminology, by 50%, 50%. Overdose is massively down. HIV is massively down among addicts. Addiction in every study is significantly down. One of the ways you know it's worked so well is that almost nobody in Portugal wants to go back to the old system. Now, that's the kind of political implications. I actually think there's a layer.
The mechanics behind helping people change. So, so just when I got out of prison in 2017, I was 26 years old. I became a rail infrastructure worker. So I started working a blue-collar job. I was on the tracks out in rail. I eventually became an aluminothermic welder, so I went a bit more specialised in 2019. In 2021, I did a semester at UWA just doing psychology, which I loved to pass that semester, but I couldn't afford to keep doing it because I just didn't have the means or the money to be able to do it, to be able to study full time. So I just continued doing what I was doing with self-education and went back into the industry. So around 2022, I originally got the business idea for Redemption Inc. Redemption Inc. At that point in time was Redemption Rail, because obviously my background was all solely in rail. And when I decided to do when I actually wrote the business plan out, my 38-page business plan, it really, there was things that came up that I realised that I needed to do. I knew I needed to be able to write programs. I knew I needed to be in a position of responsibility within the white collar industry. And, as I was pondering these decisions, I was very fortunate that someone put me forward and suggested that maybe I become they were setting up the rail program at North Metropolitan TAFE. So I went and applied, and I was fortunate enough to be able to get the opportunity to be able to develop 2 nationally accredited qualifications over the 2 years that I was there, with help with the quality and compliance team, and as the only subject matter expert. During my time at North Metropolitan TAFE, I lectured 4 cohorts of students, including an all-Indigenous cohort. Over the last 2 years, I was helping out at the Whiteman Park project. I also managed to be able to help, get put things in place so we could get a weld truck at North Metropolitan TAFE, which is, to my understanding, still getting picked up for procurement. I've been to Curtin Business School, so I graduated from the Curtin Business School's Ignition program, and I've done several courses on business, and I've done this all whilst trying to maintain work. I guess I understand how to sort of, I've gone in really all aspects of life. I've been in 2 different universities, so I've done the academic sort of side of things. I grew up in Armidale, so I've spent nearly 6 years in prison, so I understand what the criminal world is like. I've been over 5 years in FIFO, so I understand what the blue collar world is like. A couple of years as a lecturer, as well as my experiences within business, so I know what the white collar world is like. And even through business, I've also, I've got a lot of connections and contacts that are within, I guess what you'd call the Golden Triangle in Perth, like the Mosman Park to North Fremantle, all the western suburbs. So I've really, I guess, throughout my life, even though I'm 34, I've had a lot of experience when it comes to diverse backgrounds and groups. I do have an understanding of how people view things from different walks in life in society. So why me? Obviously, so that's why I've gone through the transformation process. So what I'm going to do now is, as you guys can see on the screen, that's me. So that's me smoking a cigarette while I was doing armed robberies when I was 18. The reason that I'm putting that on there, because I'm trying to make a point, because I realise that with what I'm doing, people will think that I'm maybe some sort of outlier that's different to other people or something like that. And that's why, maybe that's creating me a bit of resistance when it comes to getting this going. But the issue isn't about intelligence, it's actually about levels of consciousness. Consciousness is like the spirit, it's the soul of people. So when people have gone through a lot, if you've gone through a lot of adversity, or if you've had people have come from you had intergenerational trauma and have had to overcome that, or addiction, basically it's like the bottom level of the collective conscious. And so probably using this diagram here, so it's about under the 100. So this is where people have spent most of their life, and a lot of this is all in their subconscious mind, not in there. So what that means is that people have an understanding that they want a better life and that they wish things were differently. But it's not like that, it's not an intelligence thing where people just don't realise, but they don't understand why things keep going the way they do. And I was very much the same when I was going in and out of prison and just wondering what this was not how I wanted my life to go. So what's the idea with Redemption Inc? So essentially, it's about raising levels of consciousness. If you can see this here, I've got the correlations of levels of consciousness and societal problems. This is from Sir David R. Hawkins. So this map here, this essentially goes, back to that previous slide. This is just more of a visual representation. You can see, when it comes to the lower the levels of consciousness, the higher the rate of criminality. The worse that life is actually okay. So this is when people get quite pessimistic, and it's quite, and that's a part of being in suffering as well. When people are suffering, it's the easiest analogy to explain it is, if you're on fire, you're not going to probably, if you're a really good host normally who's just, loves to make everyone a cup of tea and stuff, you're not going to worry about that if you're on fire. All you're going to be worried about is your own concerns, So how does this all work? How does this all link in together? So if we go back, so if you look at the collective conscious, if you look at that green section called the getting by, that's where most people in society sort of sit around. People who get caught up with all the other stuff, they're in the suffering mode. And what do people do? People without realizing, are always trying to elevate their levels of consciousness. So the people in the getting by, they might, for example, on a Friday night, if their baseline might be anger or desire or fear, they might go have a few drinks and they feel a bit better, or they have a lot of drinks and they feel that love energy. They go up into, they're essentially raising their vibration artificially. People can also do this through exercise, yoga, and that's how people lift up their consciousness as well. But the problem is that when people are at the very, very bottom, it takes a lot of substances, drinks, alcohol. That's why you see that there's a lot of substance abuse amongst communities and people and different graphics that who you would think, well, this is obviously creating you a lot of harm, but it's their way of self-medicating so that they can feel better. If you give someone who is sitting at lower level vibrations most of the time, they love to drink because it makes them feel better. It's as simple as that. It's a dis-ease of how they, with what that's going on. So that's just a bit of an idea of how substances, about how the energy sort of works within people and why people are behaved in that way. A lot of it is not conscious or anything like that. So I'll go forward to this next image, which is the emotional. So this here is a bit of an emotional guidance scale. So you want to get people on the upward spiral instead of the downward spiral, which is what I was caught in for a very long time. For many, many years, I was in the downward spiral, and I've learned the things that needed to be done to get into the upward spiral. A lot of that comes from self-development. So what is levels of consciousness? If you go back to, it's consciously being aware of the things that, are going to bring you undone, the things that you're not good at. It's all those sorts of things. And people who raise their levels of consciousness generally do better than other people in society. So it's about getting people, elevating that level of consciousness so people can actually get out of a position where they're suffering, because suffering creates suffering, So, this just goes all around, if someone's in a DV relationship, I can guarantee you that that the fear is what's going to be, where the partner is, and then it's anger. So that's the range of emotions. They're not feeling the genuine love emotions that are at the higher levels, and that's from both parties. That's the victim and the perpetrator. So how do you approach something like that? So what you do is you essentially, if you look at this is the. So Carl Jung's archetypes of the collective are collective unconscious. I'm going to go through each one of them to try and explain this little diagram here. So this is the persona. So the persona is how people show up for different roles. So people have multiple personas. So if, for example, work profession, like this is how society expects, like if you think what you think maybe what a cop would be like, what a doctor is like, what a judge is like, what a bikie is like, inmate, tradie, cab driver, lecturer, service station attendant. These are all different personas that people wear in their professional role. To give this an example, it's like, if you went to, if you were to go get brain surgery and the guy was wearing, I don't know, an EMI Export singlet and a mullet, even if that was your sort of jam, you probably wouldn't want the surgeon to be looking like that, So it's about how people can, like the image that people give off, So, and that's something that people, like, obviously are consciously aware of, like when I'm a lecturer, when I was, lecturing at TAFE and I'd lecture my students, I'll be a different role than, even working blue collar in industry, because it's, I'm presenting differently, I'm more professional, and it requires me to be a different person. This is just human behaviour. And personal. So obviously people are going to be different with their romantic partner than they would be with their children or their mum or their dad, grandmother, so all these different, that's what the persona is. Okay. So the next one is the ego. So ego gets a lot of people in trouble. You have to look at Kanye West, with some of the stuff he went out with. But so basically it's our view of ourselves. So when we think of ourselves, how we think others view us, this governs how we act. So if you think you're, the greatest person on the world, you'll act like, if you think that you're better than other people, you'll act like you're better than other people. If you think you've got no value, you'll act like you have no value. So this is the ego. So it can be good, like obviously you need to have some level of ego. Everyone's got ego, but you need to have a healthy amount of ego. You can't be, if you have too much ego and you don't have the actions to back your ego up, then that's when we'll get the delusions of grandeur, but like then if you have no ego, then you have no worth because you don't see, so it's about trying to find that right balance. But so a healthy ego is good, as a conscious mind, so this, shadow. So the shadow is going to be the main part because that's what brings a lot of people undone. So when you look at prisoners, and I definitely can relate to this going in and out. Is I never understand like what was going on. Like so, it's not like you think. As we were talking earlier about with the going up the levels of consciousness on the vibration scale. So a lot of times shadow comes out when people are under the influence. They might get blackout drunk and then they do something that they regret but they can't remember it. That's where it comes out, projection or denial. So if someone can't remember what they did, then in their mind it hasn't happened. Or projection, so this could be the person that cheats on their partner. It could be even in group settings, you look at these conflicts and stuff like, where you get to like...
Information going on to reveal a bag of makeshift weapons made by Unit 18 detainees.
So the first one I'm showing you is a shiv made from plastic with a bit of a shoelace wrapped around it to enable the individual to stab the staff.
Examples of the improvised arms used by the cohort the minister calls complex, challenging and often dangerous.
It's then been ripped off and dug.
So the shadow but it's also the parts about ourselves we don't want others to know. So it's either, so it comes out in, this is, it's protected by the conscious ego, so if someone does something, the way that it's almost like a safety mechanism, their ego will stop them from learning the lesson one way or another, whether it be projection or denial. So the power, if you want to know the power of the human mind, this is how strong the human mind is that the anima and the animus, that's the masculine and feminine energies. That's something that, I've spoken about that on my YouTube channel. Okay, next one is, so this is a self. So individuation is, it's bringing the conscious awareness to the shadow. This is done by creating the right environment. So this is what I'm aiming to do with people coming through on an individual level. is to help them, with their shadow side. This is done by creating the right environment. It's also done with the way that I've got 5 values and the program as well. So what is it like? By setting compassion being one of the core values of Redemption Inc.'s guiding values. So this is a love-based version of what is normally people are embarrassed, get guilt, shame around things that are from fear. So they're fear of people knowing, which is a judgment, lower vibration response to compassion. So love, the high frequency is compassion from those with empathy, not sympathy. So this is why the whole business model is scalable. As you can see in this next slide, what I'm going to do is I'm going to play a video from Brene Brown just talking about empathy, not sympathy. And then
empathy. And why is it very different than sympathy? Empathy fuels connection. Sympathy drives disconnection. Empathy, it's very interesting. Teresa Wiseman is a nursing scholar who studied professions, very diverse professions where empathy is relevant, and came up with 4 qualities of empathy. Perspective taking, the ability to take the perspective of another person or recognize their perspective as their truth. Staying out of judgment, not easy when you enjoy it as much as most of us do. Recognizing emotion in other people and then communicating that. Empathy is feeling with people. And to me, I always think of empathy as this kind of sacred space when someone's kind of in a deep hole and they shout out from the bottom and they say, I'm stuck, it's dark, I'm overwhelmed. And then we look and we say, hey, climb down.